And finally, to sort of, in a sense, cap all of this off, I am writing myself a pastoral letter to the priests, deacons, religious, and faithful of the diocese on the sacred liturgy. I'm taking the opportunity for the introduction of a new translation of the Missal to take a moment of catechesis in the diocese as your bishop to help us all deepen our understanding of what we gather to celebrate every time we gather to celebrate the Holy Eucharist. Because I am convinced, just from talks that I've given, how impoverished our own theological understanding of what the Mass is all about has become. It's frightening to me when I ask certain questions of groups like this. I'm sure I would get a much healthier response from a group like this that tends to be much more plugged in, if you will, and well-educated and formed in your faith. But you take an average group in a parish on an adult education night and you ask certain questions of the group, I am astonished at the lack of understanding. And I'm not blaming them. I'm not blaming them. It's not their fault. I consider myself, as you've heard me say many times, the first part of the first generation that got cheated out of a proper education and formation in my Catholic faith. I was a college student at Michigan Tech before I even began to understand what was really happening in the Mass and what this was really all about. And I went to 12 years of Catholic school in the late 60s and 70s. So, you know, I need to do a catechesis with all of us. And the letter isn't just going to focus on these changes. It's going to focus on the deeper meaning of the liturgy. To get to recapture, it's going to have three main thrusts, if you will. To recapture the spirit of the liturgy, which Pope Benedict XVI has spoken of. He talks about the spirit of the liturgy. And we need to have a proper understanding of what the liturgy is about so that we understand the true spirit of what we gather to celebrate, and that it's not entertainment. It's not about a community expressing itself. It's about divine worship. It's about entering into a different realm and being taken to a different place in a transcendent kind of mystical experience of the divine. And so we need to recapture the true spirit of the liturgy. There's going to be emphasis on the principle of continuity and organic growth and development that Benedict hits so strongly. That at the Second Vatican Council, there wasn't a sudden rupture in what had gone before and, well, what comes after. And I'm sorry, you know, I tend to think that many folks think that the Church began at the Second Vatican Council. Certainly, the Second Vatican Council gives us a direction for our own time and gives us some clear guidance by the Spirit as to what the Church needs to be about in the contemporary world in which we find ourselves. You know, it clearly maps out a course for us to follow in our own time, but that is in continuity with, you know, everything that has gone on in the 2,000-year history of the Church before that. The Church didn't begin at Vatican II. That was a springboard for a new age in the Church, if you will, a new Pentecost, a renewal in the Church, to even recapture, quite honestly, some of what had gone before and that we had lost sight of. And so when it comes to the liturgy, this is true as well, that it isn't, you know, we didn't, or we should not have sort of hobbled together a new creation out of nothing, if you will, from what went before it. That we have to understand how the liturgy today is an organic development and a growth out of everything that has gone before it, even way back to St. Justin Martyr, who gives us one of the earliest descriptions of the Eucharistic celebration of the early Church. So that whole principle of continuity needs to be reinforced. And finally, I will hit very hardly on the ars, what the bishop referred to as the ars celebrandi, the art of celebrating. The art of celebrating the liturgy. And that includes everything. It includes the architectural beauty and environment. Benedict puts such a strong emphasis on beauty. The liturgy should be beautiful. It should be splendid. It should take us to a different place, as I said, and reflect beauty. And he emphasized that because God is beauty. God is beauty in its perfection. And so what we use to worship God and the way in which we worship God must also be beautiful. and inspire in us an appreciation of the beauty that is in the uncreated and Creator God. So everything associated with the liturgy needs to be done beautifully and artfully. So from the architecture and the environment of the church and in the sanctuary, to the vessels that we use, to the appointments at the altar, to the vestments worn by the priest, to the music, especially the music. There's going to be I think Kelly for her question, because I'm going to place a very special emphasis on the meaning of sacred music. You know, it isn't anything goes as long as God is mentioned somewhere in the song. You know, and our music, our sacred music, needs to be directed to divine worship of God. And so I'll have a lot to say about sacred music. So that whole area of ars celebrandi, the art of the celebration of the liturgy that we need to recapture, and it's all of its beauty, its reverence, I dare even say it's mysticism. We say, so we hear it said so often, we've lost something of the reverence and the transcendent feeling to the liturgy. And I think we need to recapture some of that without losing the good fruit that has been brought forward to us through the liturgical movement. And I will also emphasize faithfulness to the liturgy. Faithfulness to, and I'm glad Bishop Serratelli made reference to that, for all of us, for priests, for deacons, for laity as well, to be faithful to the liturgy that is entrusted to us, to be celebrated and to hand on to the subsequent generations. We don't create it. We don't tinker with it. We don't manipulate it to our own taste and desires. But it is entrusted to us as part of this long living tradition with all of these rich biblical, patristic images and language, that we be faithful to it. That principle in Sacrosanctum Concilium at Vatican II, in the Code of Canon Law, in the General Instructions of the Roman MIssal, and everything practically that's been written on the liturgy, that no one on his own authority, not even a priest, may add to, change, or delete anything in the liturgy. But we are called to be faithful and obedient when we celebrate the mystery by which Christ was obedient to the will of the Father for the sake of our salvation. So hopefully that letter will help us all along the way of liturgical renewal in our own diocese. And the Priest Council also recommended then that once the new translation has been implemented for a short time and people are starting to hear these new texts and starting to pay attention and notice that that's very different than what we had before, and people are going to be kind of alert and paying attention, we're going to seize that opportunity then to do some further liturgical catechesis with the folks, kind of a mystagogy. Those of you that are involved in RCIA, you know that you celebrate the rites, and then through the period of the mystagogia, you explain those rites, you unfold, if you will, the deeper meaning of those rites that are associated with Christian initiation. So once we have these new translations and we're beginning to use them, we're going to kind of have a period of mystagogia to reflect on then and deepen our understanding theologically of what we celebrate spiritually in the liturgy. So hopefully, with all of this effort, we won't run into some of what happened before. I remember those days very well. I was a very young little tyke serving Mass, and I remember very well. It was disturbing to me even back then as a little, 4th, 5th grader when these things, you never knew what was going to happen next when you came to Sunday Mass. Some of you might remember that, You just never knew what latest, greatest surprise was going to be pulled out at Mass. We can't let that happen again. We have to have people understand what's going to happen. So, anyway, that'll save me from what I was going to say later.